YouTube, Facebook. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club, Greatest Generation. We're going to get the music started here, let everybody into the room. We got a great program lined up for you. Thank you for joining us. Hey. Getting everybody in the room here. It's good to see you all. Welcome. Welcome to Veterans Breakfast Club, Greatest Generation Live for Thursday, July 24th. My name is Sean Hall. I'm the Director of Programming with the VBC. It's great to see you all here this evening. Our mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. Tonight, we're going to be doing something a little different, a little special. I'll use a Steelers analogy for those of you who might know it. Back whenever we would hand off to Richard Mendenhall, and then he would hand off to Hines Ward, you're going to see something magical like that tonight. As I hand off to Glenn Flickinger, and he tosses the ball to Scott Masters. It's going to be a great show. Great seeing you all. Please check us out on our website, www.veteransbreakfastclub.org. Check out all of our past and upcoming programs, both in person and online. Great to have you all here as I hand off the ball to Glenn Flickinger. Glenn.
Thank you so very much. And I got to tell you, I played football a long time ago, and my nickname was the Fumbler. So let's not hope I can overcome that tonight. Thanks, Sean. Listen, we're very, very pleased tonight to have a very special program through Scott Masters of the Crestwood Preparatory College, Crestwood Oral History Project, who many of you have been on many times with us. He has two special guests, which I'm going to let him introduce, and they're going to carry the program. The program, as all of you know, is D-Day at Juno Beach, the Canadians at Juno Beach. We've been trying to tell the story of D-Day for the past now 6 weeks since D-Day anniversary in June. And this year, through the great help of Scott Masters and his veterans that he knows and historians that he knows, we're telling more of the story of the British and the Canadians. So we're really pleased to try to tell a more complete story. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Scott Masters. For those of you who may not know, my name's Glenn Flickinger. I do this almost every Thursday night program, Greatest Generation Live, basically all things World War II. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be able to do this, and really, really pleased that tonight I just handed off to Scott, and I'm going to sit back and be in the audience and learn and listen. So Scott Masters, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that, Glenn. It's great to be here once again. And I've got to begin by welcoming three very young people. I can actually see three of my students on the screen right now, which is awesome. I don't get to see them the last week of July typically, which I'm normally fine with, but it's great to see you guys there. I'm also really pleased to welcome tonight a couple of really noteworthy guests. Mark Zelke first. Mark is a really well-known Canadian historian. I had the great honor to do a battlefield tour with him in Normandy last year, and it was just fascinating listening to his stories. Like me, he is also a Governor General's Award winner, although he won the really big award. I just won a small one. And more importantly, we've got Mr. Jim Parks with us, and Jim is the guy who got dressed up in a tie and blazer. It's really warm up here in Toronto, so I hope he's doing okay there. And Jim is a 100-year-old Juno Beach veteran. That was the Canadian beach on D-Day, of course. And Jim went in the first wave as part of the Winnipeg Rifles, and he's just got an incredible story of the day and the Battle of Normandy. So tonight you're going to get to hear two amazing stories, and I'll kind of come in a little bit here and there, but really Mark and Jim are the ones who are going to tell the bulk of the stories this evening. So Jim, I wanted to begin with a bit of an introduction to you. I've been really, really lucky to get to know you over the last decade or so at Crestwood. You've come to my school a number of times. You've participated in Remembrance Day. Of course, you did the fantastic interview that is on my school webpage. Your birthday, of course, is September 22nd, 1924. So you've got your 101st birthday coming up pretty soon. Any big plans?
Not really. Maybe a couple of short ones.
Okay, well, we'll figure something out, and hopefully I can make it up to the Legion for this one. I was listening back, Jim, to the interview we did with you a couple of years ago, and just remembering all those great stories. You had some fantastic ones of your early life growing up in the Great Depression, stealing ice blocks, going to multiple Sunday schools, and I think that was to get extra pie, if I remember correctly. And of course, you had a great image that I wanted to start with here. So I'm going to bring this up, Jim, and let you have a little talk about this in just a second. Let me go into my share screen. Because of course, Jim, one of the fantastic traditions we have in Canada is a game called hockey. And just a few months ago, of course, Canada and the United States met in. Oh, I
Sorry,
think
Scott, you got muted there.
muted myself inadvertently there. But we had that awesome Four Nations Cup a couple of months ago, and Canadian hockey was at the forefront. And Jim, I wanted to start with this picture of you. I think this is a fantastic one from the 30s. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, actually, we didn't have a uniform. Everybody was told to buy a sweatshirt, black and red. But for the picture, we bored sweaters from the Ashdown hardware store, and that's what they put in there. We didn't have many players. This is a total team, and this that fellow on the left, the big coach, he ended up being in the Winnipeg Police Department, and he actually served in the service uniform. And the other smooth looking guy with a fedora, I I don't know much about him since at the time, but he was with the St. Boniface Canadians, which was a junior hockey team, and they won the junior championship in Canada a couple of times in the 30s. I think it's because we had more kids not doing anything out west. They're always getting in trouble.
And this one's just a little bit of a close up on you. I got to say, Jim, you look exactly the same, and you've got that same incredible smile all these years later. So these uniforms were basically a function of the Great Depression. Everybody just had to wear the same color.
Yeah, that's right. You had to, for pictures, they had to borrow sweaters so everybody looked the same.
And Jim, how old about would you have been here?
About 15.
About 15, and that's kind of interesting and sort of leads to the next point I want to make before we pick up with Mark's part of the story. So, Jim, when the war starts, 1939, of course, for Canada, you're just about to turn 15 years old. You enlisted when you were quite young. Tell everybody how old you were when you managed to join up.
Well, I was 15. I'd actually been a cadet since age 10. The big thing during the Depression is to join something like that because following each parade, he also has something to eat, and which is a big thing in the early 30s for kids. You could have coffee and donuts and take something home, and it was a wonderful thing being in the cadets at that time. And they supplied us with uniforms, and the first year or so, all you wore was a hat because they didn't have enough uniforms to go around. And when they did finally get me a kilt that wouldn't fit, they said, "Well, these are kilts from World War One." I said, "Gee, they must be pretty small guys because I tried to wrap the kilt around me, it wouldn't go far enough to the belt up." But it was a pretty amazing thing at that time being a cadet.
And what made you want to join up at that really young age, Jim? What prompted it? Were you a patriot, or was it just the thing to do?
But actually, every kid that I knew, including my brother, about that age, they tried to join up, and quite a few of them did. And when I went to join up, the recruiting sergeant was my cadet sergeant. He said, "Well, Parks, what are you here for?" I said, "To join the Cameron, sir." He said, "Well, don't get in any trouble." So I end up he let me go through. He knew what age I was, but he passed me through. He must have passed quite a few through, because they're all, when I look at the pictures, we didn't fool anybody. All young looking, you know.
And you, of course, go through training and everything. You find yourself on the troop ship in fairly short order. And to give everybody a sense of context, it's a pretty remarkable part of your story. You end up in England in September 1941. So you are there very early on, and you basically spend the next 2.5 years in England, right, Jim?
Right. Well, the convoy we went over is 105 boats in the convoy. And they had all these World War I destroyers with the four stackers going back and forth protecting us from the submarines. And I think there's, like I said, 104 ships in the convoy. And behind us, there's an ammunition ship. They had it loaded with ammunition. They slowly kept it there because it was further away from the U-boats. I said, what happens if they hit it? Well, we're not counting on hitting it. We were right next door to it. We kept on watching. And you know, in the middle of the Atlantic, they had us on guard duty. Can you imagine that? Guard duty with a Sten gun, wandering around the decks. I don't know heck we're guarding, but that was the way they did things at that time. And the boat we were on was a banana boat called the SS Orbita. And it was down in the front hold. There's 250 Hondurans. They were taking them over to Scotland to work in the forest during the war. And they had their share of rum. And we tried to sneak down. There was one guy John McIver. He seemed to know how to get down there to get the rum. And he'd bring it back a bottle and pass it around. And they kept on trying to stop us from getting that, but somehow McIver seemed to have a way of getting it. So these Honduran guys, they had an unlimited supply of rum. So actually, when McIver got to the other end to land in Edinburgh, Scotland, he said, when are we going to leave port? Here we already landed.
So you end up in England September 41.
Yeah.
You're still just 16 years old, just about to turn 17 at that point. Just to give people a very rough sense, Jim, what do you do the next 2.5 years? Is it all a bunch of training?
Well, you got to remember, the thing I remember about this, they got off the boat and there's a train waiting. They had a big tea wagon and they had the biggest teacups I ever saw. They give us big cups of tea. We stayed there for about 20 minutes. They give us ginger snaps and cups of tea and put us back on the train. And we went all the way back, right straight down to Aldershot, right from, I forget what, right near Glen. It wasn't really Edinburgh, it was the other port near there. I forgot what it's called. I should remember, but it's a place where a lot of ships come from North America. They landed there. It was a large port. I just can't remember. It wasn't Edinburgh. It wasn't Glasgow.
Perhaps it was Greenock.
Must have been up north of Glasgow.
Yeah, that might be Greenock.
Yeah.
But for the next couple of years, you are in England. Is it all just training, Jim? Is that what they had you doing for that long time?
Well, remember the most, I'll tell you. We got a 48-hour pass once a month and a 9-day pass every 3 months. And we had a whale of a time when we went out on our leave. They kept us training down in the southern England. The first thing they did when we got there, they took us on a route march. We got going about 100 yards on the double. So that's all we did for about 2 months. Every time we went out, the first part was training was marching, and we did on the double. So they got us in pretty good shape. We had a good bunch. We had a good bunch of, I'd say, NCOs and officers. It turned out, overall, as time went on, they were really good people, well versed in what they could do.
Excellent. And of course, over the next several years, they're going to be getting you ready for the big invasion that everybody knows is inevitable. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, Juno Beach and the immediate aftermath. So, Jim, we're going to hand over to Mark Zelke for a little bit, and then we're going to come back to you, Jim, and sort of get the first person narration. Okay. So, Mark, I'd love it if you could go ahead and come in and give us the historical context for Juno Beach.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jim. On June 6, 1944, of course, D-Day happens. 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, of which Jim was a part, and the 2nd Canadian Armored Brigade stormed ashore on Juno Beach. Now, there were about 14,000 Canadian troops involved in that landing, which was the largest amphibious landing in history on June 6th. The stakes were really high. They were trying to gain a foothold in Germany's fortress Europe. And this Canadian formation, as Jim got into in that first introduction talk, it had been preparing for its Operation Overlord participation longer than any other Allied formations, longer than the British units and longer than the American units. Because when they got to England, the decision was already made that the Canadians would play a major role in the what would be an eventual invasion, a cross-channel invasion into France. So that was decided way back in early 1941, actually, that that would happen and that the Canadians would be a major part of that. So eventually, the Canadians formed 1st Canadian Army in Britain. It was the 3rd largest Western Allied force in the war. It totaled about 150,000 soldiers, organized into 2 corps, comprised of 5 divisions and 2 armored brigades. So really a very massive formation. And 1 corps and 2 divisions were eventually sent to Italy to participate in the Italian campaign, which put down the size of them a little bit, but they were still very robust and ready for the invasion. And I'm just going to start share screening right now. And you should be seeing a photo, I'm hoping. Is that working okay, Scott? I can't actually see.
No, not seeing it yet.
Okay, let's try that. Now? Wait, here we are. I think I've got it. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Got it.
Now you're seeing. Okay. This photo actually is really good because it's taken on the day before the Canadians gathered for the, well, they've already gathered for the invasion, and that's what they're doing here. And this is actually the Royal Winnipeg Rifles, a photo of the unit that Jim Parks was part of, getting ready to go across and take part in the invasion. Now, in the days before the invasion, fleet sailed. There were thousands of ships all along the British coast, particularly in the south, gathering. And the Canadians principally loaded at Southampton and Portsmouth. And this is a photo taken it's Southampton, and mostly was Canadians aboard these ships. The camouflage netting was to keep them from being partially easily identified by German reconnaissance. Which probably wouldn't work very well, but that was the intention. And so that at this point, when this photo was taken, there's actually Canadian troops on board these different vessels underneath these camouflage nettings. And this map shows the actual invasion as it happened. So you can see, if you're looking at the photo, if you're looking from the sea towards the land, on the right is the U.S. First Army. The one on the extreme right is U.S. 4th Infantry Division. It's landing at Utah Beach. And the one on the left is the 29th Infantry Division and 1st Infantry Divisions landing at Omaha. Now, the entire landing force was under command of 21st Army Group, and the commander of that was General Bernard Montgomery. So Americans and British were under command of a British general. Inland, you can see again, if you're looking seaward or from the sea towards the land, on the right is the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Division. They led with a night jump into France with the intention of seizing ground inland to prevent Germans from reinforcing. On the extreme other side of the map, you'll also see 6th British Airborne Division, which was doing exactly the same kind of mission. And the British 6th Airborne Division, one of the units within it was the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion. So we had a Canadian presence there as well. Looking at British Second Army landing on Juno Beach, you have, or the 3 beaches, you have the British 50th Infantry Division landing at Gold Beach, and I understand you had a program recently about the Gold Beach experience. And on the extreme other flank, you had the British 3rd Infantry Division landing at Sword Beach. And right in the middle was the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division landing at Juno Beach. So that's kind of the layout of the whole invasion and how it was playing out. This photo was taken when the Reserve Brigade, the 9th Canadian Infantry Brigade, landed a few hours after the assault forces that Jim Parks and his Royal Winnipeg Rifles were part of. This photo makes it look like everything's going very easily and that it's an easy time getting ashore. Because the beach has already been won at this point. It was far harder situation than it really was or is at this point. The 7th and 8th Infantry Brigades led the invasion, and when they hit the sand that morning, and Jim will give you a taste of that shortly, I'm sure, but it's to be noted that Juno Beach proved the 2nd most heavily defended beach in the morning of June 6th, and the Canadian casualties reflected that. The most heavily defended beach, of course, was Omaha Beach, where the Americans landed and suffered very heavy casualties. But the Canadians prevailed, and by early afternoon, they started advancing inland on a road leading out of a village called Bernier-sur-Mer. And these troops are French-Canadian from the Regiment de la Chaudière of 9th Infantry Brigade. And note, just as a point of interest, that about every 5th man in this photo is carrying a full-size shovel, and it's slung on his back, and others were carrying full-size picks. The Canadians, as they trained in 1941 through to 1944, came to realize that the little shovel, the little flip shovel trenching tool that the Army provided initially wasn't very good at cutting into the ground. So they got big shovels and big picks so they could dig their slit trenches quickly and get their people down into the ground. The Canadians on June 6th, you'll see this map. This shows their advance inland. And they moved almost the 6 miles inland. Don't know why I'm losing that. They went 6 miles inland. Their destination, the objective for the day at the end of the day on June 6th, in the very lower bottom of that map, you'll see an airfield called Carpiquet, and that was to be their D-Day objective. They didn't quite reach that. They got very close. On the very right-hand side of the map, you'll see you might be able to make out the 1st Hussars, which was a group of tanks, almost managed to reach the airfield, but they didn't have any infantry with them and they started running out of fuel, so they had to turn around. But the Canadians did get 6 miles inland. That was the deepest penetration that the Allies achieved on June 6, 1944. But it came at a very heavy cost. There were 340 Canadians in the landing force that died on June 6, and 574 were wounded. Now, when you consider that against the total number of about 14,500 Canadians that landed that day, it doesn't seem like that high a casualty rate, 1 in 15. But that's not the full story. There were just 5 infantry assault battalions in the actual wave that landed on D-Day at Juno Beach, and that numbered 2,050 men. So 340 killed. Of those 340 killed, 218 came from just those 2,050 men, as did 478 wounded. So actually, more than 25%, all about 30% of the Canadians that landed on the beach in the first waves were either killed or wounded. And I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and we'll turn it over to Jim to tell his part of the story.
Thank you for that, Mark. And that's one of the things I really like about this. I've got a couple of students in the room, Mark, and we always talk about the difference between primary and secondary sources in history. And, you are providing the secondary accompaniment, but we get to hear Jim tell the story of boots on the ground and, of course, quite a bit of boots on the water here as it happens, Jim. So, Jim, in the lead up to D-Day, I'd love it if you could begin by telling us a little bit about some of the specialized training that you were starting to do.
Well, we started almost a year like August of 43. We started to do training. Then we went up to Scotland for 3 weeks to do specialized training. And we started off just doing going in as a platoon, one platoon at a time. Then we went to one company at a time, and gradually built up to a regiment and to a brigade. And we started to use live ammunition at the time. And they said they're allowing for 11% casualties when you use live ammunition. But we were kind of lucky. We only ended up with a few. One was killed accidentally, and there's a few were wounded by some of our shells when the artillery fell short. So we did pretty well. I don't know how the other outfits did, but in that particular exercise, we did quite well. And we actually, when you go in Scotland, I forget where it is. I think we're up by a place called Inverary, Scotland. And this is where we did our training. And we did a lot of platoon training, company training, like I say, then we went with the whole battalion. And I got soaked quite a few times. And I ended up one time I had to swim in because that was something. Well, I would say something would happen again on the 6th of June. I had to swim in then too, but I had to swim in that particular exercise. I lost my rifle, and they charged me for losing a rifle. Lost the water. It was either me or the rifle, so I don't mind paying for it at that time. It was pretty dicey up there. It was Scotland. It was raining. Some places always rain sometimes during the day. At least that's the way it seemed. And we're up in those hills, and then we get down into those locks and do our training with these assault boats. And it seems to me they give us an extra uniform down there, so that meant we had 3 uniforms. We always had one uniform that was nice to go out with, and one we used to do on parade. So we ended up with an extra uniform. So we had 3 uniforms up there because they're always wet, and we're in Quonset house. You know what a Quonset house is? So it's only meant to have 10 men, and we had 30 men in the Quonset hut, and a little tiny stove in the middle that you were supposed to heat it up to help dry uniforms. So it wouldn't dry them very well. So the surrounding countryside was all kinds of pine trees. So we went out and cut down the pine trees, and we used that for wood. But lo and behold, we were charged damages for the pine trees. I think the Canadian government they also had to replant them, as far as I heard. So all those nice trees that the Scotch had, we use them for ourselves.
And Jim, what about in the last couple of weeks? Where did you end up towards the end of May?
Well, we're in a camp called C2. So camp was completely surrounded by barbed wire, and American troops were parading around the barbed wire. And their orders were the last 2 weeks we're there for about 4 or 5 weeks, that we can get out. Then the last 2 weeks we were confined. And Americans were parading around in between these rolls of barbed wire with orders to shoot anybody to try to get out. Because by that time we had been shown what they call this, they make them on the ground, the sand table exercise. We're forgetting all these things. The sand table exercise, and they show you all these different fictitious names of the place we're going to, what we're supposed to do. And they were actually copies of the ground that we're going to cover when we hit Normandy. So we knew they told us these grounds were similar to what we'll meet in Normandy, but they didn't tell us that they were the exact copy of what we were supposed to see. But we saw a lot of sand table exercises, a lot of actual exercises on the same type of ground. So when I look back, we were pretty properly prepared, as much as you could be, for getting into Normandy.
And how was the food in those last few weeks?
Oh, we were fed, but we're in American camp, so we were fed American rations. So what we were getting is pork chops, roast beef, apple pie, ice cream. And I said, guys, is this special for us? No, this is our normal rations. Because Americans did have these rations, but we never had that as rations. Ours were the British rations, right? Not very good. Lots of bully beef in the tins. I didn't mind bully beef as far as that goes. Put it in the frying pan, throw a few onions in it. It comes out pretty good. Yeah.
So they were giving you the best food of the war right before you're about to put your life on the line.
Setting us up for the kill. That's what it was for. Ice cream too. That was something. Yeah.
Wow. So of course you guys end up boarding the ships, getting ready for June the 5th, but June the 5th gets called off and it gets pushed back a day. Tell us what it was like when you crossed the channel that night.
Well, it seemed to be a lot of guys got seasick. It seemed pretty rough, but I never ever got seasick. I was sort of lucky. They give you these pills, and I'd hand them out. As a sergeant, I'd hand these pills out, and I'd keep a few extra, and I'd throw 3 or 4 down. I never got seasick. As long as you can see the sea, you're okay. But if they kept you stuck in below in the boat, you couldn't see them. That's when you got seasick. Yeah.
And I'm just following in the chat. Glenn, did you want to ask that question of Jim now?
Well, sure. I'll ask the first question that was in the chat from Brad, if that's okay. Brad was wondering what sort of rifle you carried. Was it a Lee Enfield rifle? And if that was the case, what did you think of that weapon?
Well, that's a good weapon, because no matter where you threw it down the ground, it didn't take much for it to, it wouldn't misfire. It didn't take much to clean it up. You could put your hand in where the bolt was and pull out the dirt if there's any dirt in there, and you click it a few times, you knew it worked. They're very reliable rifles. That was a Lee Enfield.
Do you know how it compared to the American M1 rifle? Did you ever shoot an M1 by chance?
I never had that one, but they had a good one.
Yeah.
Theirs is sort of semi-automatic. The Garand, was it the Garand? Yeah. Theirs sort of said it seemed to me they were heavier than our rifle. Because I did get one of those when I'm back up in Holland during the winter. I got a hold of an American rifle. It seemed pretty heavy.
And that was the rifle, the Lee Enfield, that the Brits also used. Is that right?
Yeah. You know how they got the name Bren, eh?
No.
The Bren gun?
Oh,
Brock,
Bren gun. No, I don't know the Bren gun name.
PR is from Brock of Czechoslovakia, and EN is the Enfield of England. So they got together and made this Bren gun. So it's made from Brock and Enfield. So it's BREN.
Ah. Okay. And
That's
then,
free. No charge.
and then the other question, Jim, is how did Canadians in general feel about fighting under the direct command of the Brits and Montgomery?
Well, it didn't seem any different. You always had they called the limeys, if you call them the limeys, right?
Limeys, okay.
And he when the first thing he did when he took over all his group, he got rid of all the guys who were too old, couldn't hack it. The guys in the 40s, get them out of the infantry. He cleaned everybody out, so they end up they had to reinforce as many people as they could to replace them. But he got anybody who was over a certain age, you got rid of them. We said we want people that can move, so that's what he did. So that was our first introduction to Montgomery. Then he come around and to each unit or each brigade, we'd all gather. He'd stand on the Jeep and the big orders would gather around, and everybody run to the Jeep and he'd give a talk about what kind of a show it's going to be. We're going to be. They always, the English are always talking about being a good show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we invite anybody else to ask a question that's in the audience at the moment of Jim? Anybody with their hand raised? Sean, you see anybody?
Let me take a look here. 1 second. Okay, any hands raised? Oh, Zach Dunn and Rick Weber. Hold on a sec, Zach, and I'll get to you.
We know Zach Dunn. Yeah.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your story. It's always great hearing it. I was curious what you were feeling, the night before, day before. Were you nervous? Did you have butterflies? Just take us through what your thoughts and feelings were heading before D-Day.
Well, you're sort of you're never going in, and then you think of all the movies you had. I wonder if it'd be something like that. And you're always like I use the word apprehensive. You're sort of nervous and wondering what it's going to be like, because you're going to be jumping off the boat or whatever you're going to do. So in our particular case, I was in a landing craft tank. We had a mortar carriers, and there were 2 armored bulldozers in front. Now, when we went into shore, the armored bulldozers were supposed to go out, and with grappling hooks, they pull all these obstacles out of the water. But they did that, but when they tried to drop us off, our border carriers, we went into the water and they sank, and so we had to swim. So we didn't get involved in any of that part. But so we only lost the 2 carriers there. We still had 4 more left. So the crew from our 2 carriers, we mixed up with the other 4 carriers and sort of supplement them. And they said we're going to get a new carrier in 2 days. We never ever got one for 10 weeks. But they give us a 1,500 weight truck, and we use that as a carrier. We actually lost 1 truck because when they shelled the shrapnel hit the engine and drained the water, drained the radiator out. So we ended up 2 different trucks at the time. But that's what instead of having a Brendan carrier, we had trucks for a while, for about 10 weeks. We're supposed to get them right away, but the fact that we had something was better than nothing. But we got we lost all of our stuff on our carrier. I had a camera with an eight shots in each film. I had about 8 or 9 rolls of film, and I lost them all. I was going to take all kinds of pictures. I was going to scoop everybody. That was a good plan. Good plan.
Speaking of scoops, Jim, there's a little video that I want to play, and I was hoping that you could narrate it. Of course, there was very little footage, from the original D-Day invasion, but there's one famous sequence. Let me go into share screen here. There's one famous sequence that survives of the North Shore Regiment going ashore at Juno Beach. And I take it, Jim, they would have been about roughly 2 kilometers or so to your east. So it's a little bit of a different look, but please explain to people what they're looking at here.
Well, this is a salt boat, and you have about 36 people there, but you have 3 sections. That's a section in the center. There's 10 men in there, and on each side there's 10. And of course you had the officers and so on, and then you had the person that was a Navy guy that was one Navy guy that was during the steering, taking the boat into shore, and this is what it would look like. There's the obstacles on the water that the armored bulldozers to pull out. They had explosives on the top, on each top of those obstacles. They had wine bottles with a detonator, and the wine bottle was full of explosives. It may not be a wine bottle every case, but most time it was.
And it's incredible footage to see, Jim, and to hear somebody like you talk about that, you know, having gone through that training and everything. I think it's a remarkable experience. Now, your own story that morning, Jim, was different. You were coming in on a landing ship tank, of course. You mentioned being in a Bren gun carrier, mortar carrier. What happened to you as you were about to hit the beach?
We had this landing cramp tank. I told you we had these 2 armored bulldozers. They pulled off, and they were okay. Because they were waterproof to go to about 6 feet of water in the ocean, because they're built pretty high up at the ground. But the cockpit would get about 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and that was had armored plates around it. So they were able to get in. But our mortar carriers, we had sheets of metal on the side. We're supposed to go 3 or 4 feet, but with the wave action, it didn't take very long for the boat be immobilized by the water coming into the carrier. Once you got in there, even though you had a waterproof and you had a snorkel in there, it would still put it out of commission.
I think Rick Weber had a question. Rick?
Sure, go ahead.
I got a comment to Scott. Scott, I can see why you're now named Master. This gentleman is incredible. And as well as your other gentleman, Mark. I wrote down notes. I have more notes, and I learned more about overall numbers in 5 minutes than I've learned in years. But my question should probably go at the end of the show. My question is both to Mark and actually Scott and Jim. How many more incredible people are still alive like Jim Parks? This gentleman he reminds me of other people, and I won't mention any names, but we all know who they are. They remember everything at 101 going on 102. That's incredible. So the numbers that I showed, or they were talked about, there was 150,000 Canadians participated. Is that correct?
Mark,
yes.
Go ahead, Mark.
There were 150,000 Canadians in the 1st Canadian Army to make the full strength, and 14,500 actually at D-Day.
Right.
So it's a huge tent with a small group within it. That 150,000 changes over time as casualties and stuff add up. So basically, you're looking at pretty close to 500,000 Canadian soldiers served in 1st Canadian Army over the course of World War II.
Okay. Well, basically, the numbers that I hear from U.S. Survivors of World War II is anywhere from 50 to 60,000, of which there's only about 1,000 left that actually were at D-Day. So I guess my question is, how many guys survived of the 150 that were went to D-Day, how many are still alive, like Jim?
Jim may well be our only June 6th survivor, as
Wow.
far as I'm aware. Scott, can you think of anyone else? We had a couple, but they both passed away.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the names. There was another man named Len Van Roon in the artillery that we interviewed earlier this year, but it doesn't look like he was able to come this evening. There is another Canadian veteran in the room tonight, but we'll come to him a little bit later. I would guess the number of D-Day vets still alive in Canada is probably somewhere between 50 and 100 at the most across the whole country, and probably on the lower end. So Jim is
Yeah,
Jim is incredible, but thank you. I was going to try
exactly.
to say that to the end, but you know, if you stop now, I would be totally in awe. But I know he's going to continue. So thank you so much, Scott. You're the best. And one last thing, for his students on board, this is a true historian, and he is a terrific interviewer. So thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Rick. There were two other questions in the chat, and I saw John had his hand raised. Should we go to have a couple more questions, Scott, or you want to continue?
Why don't we go to that question that Don had? I think that would fit in nicely here.
Okay, go ahead, Don.
Hi there, Don Levers here. Hi, Jim. Nice to see you again. Haven't seen you since Normandy in last year, so great to see you again.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to introduce my daughter and granddaughter to Jim when we were at the 80th anniversary, so it was quite a thrill for them as well.
Right.
You asked, Richard, I think you were asking about how many Canadians, were you asking how many landed on the beach on D-Day?
No, I
okay.
think that was answered.
Okay.
I was just curious of how many gems or how many intelligent, remembering people that it's like Jim. I mean, this guy is incredible.
Yes.
For his age is absolutely unbelievable.
Now, I think, Scott, I'm not sure. Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there was one other Winnipeg rifle at the celebrations in Normandy this year. I saw him with his hat badge on, but I don't know if he was a D-Day participant. Do you know that, Jim?
Well, I know the guy. I think he was there. I'm not sure what part of D-Day he come in. Because he might be coming in the afternoon. I don't know what part he come in.
Do you recall his name?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to look it up.
Thank you.
It's a small number. Mark and I were at the 80th anniversary last year, and I think the total number of Canadian veterans in attendance was just 14.
Yeah. And at the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Holland that just happened in May, we had, I think the number was 20 veterans there that Veteran Affairs had brought over. And part of it is it's a pretty grueling trip now for our veterans who are, Jim's practically among the young spry ones. To travel from Europe or Canada to Europe and Europe back again is not an easy undertaking.
No,
we didn't go with the main group.
No.
We just don't tell them what you do.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
You went on your own.
We went on our own. And the other group, there's about 14 of them, but we went on our own, and our itinerary was a bit different. But we did meet them for the one of the main ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Jim, you got a lot of attention last year because you rode a landing craft into the beach, which got quite a bit of international news attention. And I was wondering with that, Jim, I did want to go back to the morning of June 6th for a moment, because you do still have one or two really incredible stories to hear. And Rick, if you're amazed at what you've heard so far, Jim's story only gets better. So, Jim, you see the Bren gun carrier in front of you sink. What happens to you when you get in the water?
Well, the name of that landing craft was a Jack Sparrow. Yeah.
The duck.
What's that?
It was the duck named Jack Sparrow. Yeah.
The duck named Jack Sparrow. Yeah. Okay. What was that question again?
So what happens to you when you're about to go in the water on your Bren gun carrier?
Oh, well, we had our mortar carriers set up following it. We were to follow the bulldozers off the landing craft. And we're supposed to be there at H-2 because the bulldozers are supposed to take the obstacles of the water. So the landing craft assault would be free to come in. But as you know, we got it mixed up with the landing craft as well. And I ended up swimming in, and there's a few of the infantry guys had been wounded and killed. There's a Corporal Scaife. I always mention his name, Scaife, from Saskatchewan. He'd been killed on the beach. So since I lost my weapon, I picked up his Sten gun and his grenades. And that's what I used for the rest of the time I was over in Europe. I used Corporal Scaife's Sten gun and his grenades we used a few times, but the Sten gun I kept for the rest of the war.
And I'll bring this image up, Jim. This is Corporal Scaife that you were talking about.
That's right.
Jim, this is always something I appreciated when you were talking to my students, is you didn't just tell the story as a military tactical story. It's very personal, and you're talking about these other men that you knew. So I was always very taken by something you told me about Corporal Scaife. You know, what do you remember about him before D-Day?
Well, I just know he's one of the people in the companies, and then I never saw him again until he was mortally wounded on the beach. And I remember seeing him, and I've always remember flopping beside him, and he was his eyes were still open, and he was but it was sort of glassy looking. So he'd been in shock, and he must have been mortally wounded at the time. And I picked up the Sten gun, and I took his grenades, and I actually grabbed a small pack because it had stuff in it I could use, like socks and so on. But I had that for about 50 yards, and I lost it. But I still had the grenades and the Sten gun from Corporal Scaife. He was nice. He's a well-liked fellow as far as I know, because you got all the time in England, he got to know people quite well. Even though it was about 700-800 in the unit, you got to know people by looks and so on. And some you liked and some you didn't like, but some you knew that were good people.
And if I recall, Jim, you had a story about him in athletic competitions. I think it was tug of war.
Oh, yeah. Well, units used to have tug of war. If I forget many, you used to have 10 men. And the last guy at the very end, the anchor man, was the furthest away from the center where you pull them apart. But he always wore big boots with a big blade in the front to help him dig into the ground, and he'd hold the rest of the troops. But that was one of the most exciting things to watch, is tug of war, because they're 6 feet. You have to pull that rope 6 feet to put the other guy out of commission. And that's and he was one of the better ones they had. Corporal Scaife and Big Mike Corney and a few other guys like that. Yeah. And Frank Feely, this guy didn't look that big, but he used to have a four team horses up in Dauphin, Manitoba. He used to deliver stuff. He had four horses, so he had to hold them with his arms. He had muscles like Popeye, on his arms. Pretty strong fellow.
So, Jim, after you picked up his Sten gun and his pack, were you able to make it across the beach fairly easily?
I got to a couple of sand dunes. And I knew that our mortar carriers would be coming in shortly. So it'd be coming into the same area. So they come whipping by and went further on. So I had to dash up, and as a guy called Buer, the sergeant major, used to be our regimental policeman around Winnipeg, and he knew a lot of his guys by our first name. And I said, "He's where are you going, Jim?" And I said, "I'd have to try to get your carriers. Well, up there, get the hell up there." And the way I went. He knew most of a lot of the Winnipegs, and he ended up coming back to the police force in Winnipeg again. We're very well liked fellow.
And we should transition back to Mark, Jim. Mark is going to take us through the next phase of things, getting off the beach and through the next couple of days. I think Glenn has a question first.
No, not a question. I just want to recognize another World War II veteran who is on the program tonight, Russell Freeberg. Russell, I unmuted you. I just would like you to say hello.
I'm listening to this with a great interest. I really admire Jim for being part of the landing.
Right.
Jim Russell was part of the 8th Armored Division
under 8th Armored.
Under the 9th Army, Simpson, and participated in the liberation of Europe a little bit after you cleared the way, starting around the Battle of the Bulge, as I recall. So, Russell, thank you so much for being on. We appreciate continuing.
The Canadians were on our northern flank in the 9th Army.
And I think you told me they took all the beer. Is that right? No, I wasn't. I'm reading something between the lines. But Russell, thanks so much. I just wanted to make sure we recognized you as another World War II veteran. Thank you.
And while we're acknowledging World War II veterans, I also want to say hello to George Ferguson, who's in the room. And George is a 101-year-old Canadian veteran of the Battle of Normandy. We're going to have him come on and say hello at the very end, though. So, George, we will come back to you soon, I promise. So, Mark, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm going to do the screen share again. So a lot of you will probably recognize this fellow. This is Montgomery, Bernard Montgomery. I want to talk about a little bit about him right now because he was really the architect of the major strategy for the Normandy invasion and what the campaign that followed after the landings. And the plan it's been in the last few years, a number of historians, myself included, have been working on fine-tuning and expanding on what the overall plan was. And so this goes to that. The idea was that the Americans would eventually do the major breakout from Omaha, Utah, where they could get out into more open ground and have a better ability to maneuver. And the Canadians and British at the same time would be drawing, by threatening the city of Caen, would be drawing the German armored divisions, the Panzer divisions, towards them so that pressure wouldn't be over on the American flank. And so a lot of the really, really heavy fighting that takes place for the British and the Canadians, and Jim will be talking about this, where June 7th to June 12th, the Canadians came very close to being overrun, was part of a deliberate strategy by Montgomery to draw the German divisions that were Panzer armored divisions down upon the Canadians and the British. And then the idea was, of course, that they would destroy these divisions in the fighting. And ultimately, it doesn't quite go the way that Montgomery had hoped. In fact, the fighting becomes extremely difficult for both sides, the German, British, and Canadian sides, with extremely heavy casualties. But it's good to know that overall strategy that was in place. And as part of that, 3rd Canadian Infantry Division was super built by the Allies to a type of strength that was surpassed the normal way that 3rd Division should have been formed. It had a bigger, robust number, a lot more artillery attached to it. And normally the Canadians used British artillery base of the 25-pounder. But for the invasion and the advance inland, we swapped out the 25-pounder guns and took over these American 105 millimeter pounder guns that were called the Priest. The reason for that is you'll see they're tracked. The 25-pounder gun was pulled by a truck. And so it was slower and more difficult to bring into action. You had to park the truck. You had to take the gun off the carrier, turn it around, set it up. That could all happen pretty quickly, but not as quickly as the priests could go into action. So that was the idea behind upscaling the priests, giving the Canadians a lot of real power there. And that made a big difference. So the idea, of course, is to pull the Germans in, and you can see here a map. It's a good plan on paper that Montgomery had, but the reality became quite different as the advance came up the beach. So this map shows the Canadians advancing from the top of the map inland. And you can see there's quite a number of arrows that go up and then they turn around and they go backwards. And that's where the Canadians became very close to being overrun. And in fact, at OT and Buron, the Canadians of the North Shore, North Nova Scotia Highlanders, and the Sherbrooke Fusiliers tanks actually did get overrun. They were attacked by the primary force that the Canadians were fighting in this time frame was the 12th SS Panzer Regiment, the 12th SS Hitlerjugend Panzer Division, and that was made up of Hitler Youth. The Hitler Youth had been indoctrinated from early on as children, and we're still actually only in their late teens, early 20s, most of the soldiers. And they were fanatic Nazis. They had been trained to believe that they were the supermen, the ultimate sign of achievement of the Aryan race, and that kind of thing. And so when they started fighting the Canadians and they suffered heavy losses, this is actually a photo of a tank battle going on between the Canadians and the Germans at the time. There's not a lot of these kind of real combat photos existent today, but they smashed into our Canadians and they overran a lot of them. And Jim will speak to this as well because he was very much involved in that. And every village that we fought in that June 7th to June 12th period, you can see the level of destruction. Everything was pretty much destroyed as the landscape was wrecked with the fighting between the Canadians and the Hitler Youth, but also we were fighting against the 2nd Panzer Division and the Panzer Lehr Division. So 3rd Infantry Division was facing an attack by the majority of 3 very strong, very elite German Panzer divisions. And the idea on the German side was that they had planned to push the Canadians right through to Juno Beach and off the beach so that they could then go out to the right and left and clear up the British on either flank and thus defeat the invasion. So Canada found itself in the nexus, if you will, of the attempt by the Germans to defeat this invasion. And the Canadian troops hung on, but it was a very close run thing. And I think now we can turn over to Jim again for that part of the story, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Absolutely. So, Jim, in many ways, I recall you're telling the story of what happened at Puteaux as being the most intense part of your Normandy experience. What were your experiences there, sort of boots on the ground?
Yeah. So we were, like I said, we lost our mortar carriers, so we blended our troops with the other 4 mortar carriers. And we were going into Puteaux. You must remember that time of year, the wheat fields were about grain was about 3 or 4 feet high at least. So when in the German we got overrun, we didn't. it wasn't what you call a big artillery barrage or anything like else. It just seemed to be they popped up here and there because they were able to infiltrate through the cornfields on either side, and they in Putot itself. I was with our group. We had mortar set up in an orchard just south of Putot, and we just we got they must have vectored us because the shell is quite a bit. We thought, well, let's get out of here, get out of that orchard, and we pulled back further towards the borders. So it's we didn't see. We knew there was there. They told us that the Germans were in Putot and around the village. And then the Canadian Scottish, they launched a counterattack and we took the land that we lost. So that really helped. It was a very successful counterattack that they had, because they were up against, like I said, quite a formidable group of German soldiers.
And Jim, how many casualties did the Winnipeg Rifles suffer in that battle?
Oh, quite a bit. A lot of times we just got guys, recruits in, replaced the one we lost in D-Day or day after, and we lost some of those too. So we were going with, instead of normally going with those 600, 700 people, we were going with high 300s, 400s, 385, 425. That'd be our total strength. Our strength wasn't very high. But normally we should have been 700 or 800 people. And you leave some of the battle, but that was the amount we had.
And Mark, you might be able to comment on this better than Jim. Jim, I don't know if you would have learned this in the moment, but of course, many of the Canadian soldiers in the Winnipeg Rifles didn't just die in the course of battle. They were murdered by the Hitler Jugend.
Yes.
What are the numbers on that, Mark?
I should have looked that up. I believe we had about 185 Canadian troops are murdered in that June 7th to June 12th period. So not all Royal Winnipegs. The North Shore, the North Nova Scotia Highlanders, particularly in the Sherbrooke Fusiliers, suffered quite a few number of murders. There's a monument at the Abbaye d'Ardenne that where a small number of Canadians were murdered at the command of the one brigade commander, Kurt Meyer, who gave the order that he basically didn't want to see these soldiers anymore, and they were taken into the back of the abbey and murdered. So it became one of the big war crimes that involves the Canadian Army, with some prosecutions of commanders of the Hitler Youth happening. But yeah, and part of it, when you look at the psychology of how these murders started, is again, remember I mentioned the Hitler Youth viewed themselves as supermen, and when they started getting killed by the Canadian troops, they kind of went ballistically angry and off the rails effectively, and their commanders were mostly veterans of the Russian front. They had been fighting and they were brought in to form the division, so their commanders did nothing to restrain that. In fact, if anything, they encouraged it and drove it forward, because they were used to a sort of take no prisoners attitude in the Russian front, and they basically migrated that onto the Western Front.
Jim, do you remember learning about those murders? Like, did you guys hear rumors about what was going on, or did you witness some of it?
Well, yes, we did. We heard about them, and the instructions were that we were not to shoot any prisoners. They really emphasized that in telling us if we ever caught any prisoners, they emphasized they're not to shoot them in retaliation. I remember that specifically at the time. Yeah.
It must have been tough to deal with, though. I'm sure you lost a lot of friends in that fighting.
Yeah, I can't remember all the lists now, but there's quite a few. And Billy Hood was one of them, one of our neighborhood kids. He lost himself, and there's Jimmy Keir's another one. These are names you don't forget. Nice people.
Absolutely. And it was, we didn't mention it as yet, Jim, but your brother was about 2.5 years older than you. He was involved on June the 6th as well. Do you know what regiment your brother was in and where he would have been during these few days?
Well, Jack. He's 15 months older, and he was with a different platoon, but in the same company as I was. He was involved quite a bit as well. And I can't tell you all the particulars what he did, but I knew we were involved in just staying alive and making sure we weren't getting caught. And we knew what was going on. If you look around, let's say if you look around the corner, and one of the sergeants said, "You look around the corner, shoot first, and then look." But we didn't do that because we didn't know who was around the corner. So they, like I say, they infiltrated around. We didn't exactly know where they were. But when a counterattack went in, they pulled back. They pulled back. Yeah.
And would you and he see one another with any kind of frequency as the fighting was going on?
Well, I had the escort of one of the Hitler Youth, and he was the same age as I was. You know, like I can still see him. Of course, he had no hat on, just blonde hair, and he looked at me, and I was looking at him, and all the way back to the battalion headquarters. I wasn't too close to him. You ought to make sure that we weren't too close to him. But he surrendered, and he wasn't going to do any damage. Because what can he do? If he got away with me, there's all the other guys all around him.
He's asking about Jack.
Yeah.
Jack.
Yeah. Well, Jack was my brother. Yeah. Well, he was involved with the. He was in Pertot. He was going in. He was told to go in and look around the square. It really isn't a square, just sort of more of an opening. They call it the square. And he looked around the corner, and the story is that as he looked around the corner, a German soldier looked around the corner too. So they saw each other face to face, and both people went back to their own unit. So what else are you going to do, right? Yeah.
And I guess, Mark, following the intensity of Puteaux, the Winnipeg Rifles had a little bit of a rest, and then things really start to pick up in Carpiquet the following month.
That's right. So June 12th, you can sort of see the Canadians and the Germans had been bashing away at each other. So it's almost like a couple boxers in the ring who say, "Oh, enough is enough. We're both on the ropes. Let's stop for a bit." And the Canadians needed to rebuild, as did the British on either of their flanks because of the heavy casualties they had. And the Germans pulled back to regroup as well, and established themselves further inland, in order to set up. So yeah, you have a change. And then you go to here we go, July 4th. You have the Canadians launched their next operation, which was called Operation Windsor. And remember I mentioned Carpiquet Airfield and how it had not got taken on June 6th. So the mission on July 4th, 1944, was to rectify that situation and to take the airport, which was on the extreme flank from the city of Caen, and that would take some pressure off the British who were fighting to try and capture the city. So that was kind of the big mission that was underway. The Canadians attacked down in the lower bottom of the map. You can see arrows going forward that then hook back and hook back. That's the Royal Winnipeg Rifles. That's the operation that Jim's next battle is going to be here. And the Carpiquet airfield was the fighting there was extremely hard. These hangars were objectives for the Royal Winnipeg Rifles, and you can see they were destroyed in the battle. And that tank, which is a Fort Garry horse tank, was knocked out in the operation. The Germans were fighting from inside bunkers like this one. This is actually a bunker at Carpiquet Airfield, and it's still there today, a remnant of it. And so they had very strong positions that they were fighting in. And in fact, in the hangars, they had fortified the hangars to a degree, and they would actually, at various points, they had where a German tank would roll out of the hangar and fire for a bit, and then roll back into the cover of the hangar. So it was an extremely difficult battle, and this is the last photo I'll share. It's a Canadian soldier on July 5th, actually, getting ready to go into an attack, not a Carpiquet. But I like it because it gives you a good idea of the equipment that a Canadian soldier carried on these days into the battle. And you can see it's a lot of kit. He's got a shovel, he's got his bags, ammunition, his Lee Enfield rifle, and is ready to go. And I can almost imagine Jim dressed up just about like that as he went into the Carpiquet battle. And I will then give it back to Jim to tell you that story.
Jim, would you have looked like that going into the Carpiquet battle, all that kit?
Oh, you must remember I was with the mortars, right?
Yeah.
So we had to make sure we had our stuff was as light as we can, and we had to move 2-3 times. Our mortars were out in the open, so we tried to get to a place where was a farmhouse or a building between us where the enemy was, because you set your 3-inch mortars up in the open, you're vulnerable to anything, machine gun fire, whatever it is, and we'd fire from behind the house. So we had to move 2-3 times because they must have vectored us somehow. They know who you were, so they do counter. So we learned that we got to be pretty smart. We just fire a few rounds and move somewhere else. So the NCOs we had, they became pretty good at working off their map and their compass. It's easy to do because you had the compass was a pretty good, pretty accurate way of directing your fire.
And tell us what you remember, Jim, about the Battle of Carpiquet as it was going on.
Well, like I say, we with our mortars, we had them set up not too far from the hangars. We could fire what we could. We had to move a few times because they no sooner we fire a few rounds, they knew we were there. And at that stage of the game in Normandy, they were pretty accurate at finding where you were. They had what they call a vectoring system. Somebody from one end would just locate where you were, and somebody at another end, where the lines crossed, that's where you were. And so they could direct the fire on it. And they were pretty quick at doing it. We wouldn't fire that many rounds. When we get the hell out of there, maybe move a couple 100 yards away. So if you stayed where you were in position, you end up getting fired upon, and you weren't doing any good. You couldn't fire when you opened.
And as I recall, Jim, there was a moment where you did come under pretty intense fire. I think it was Moaning Minis.
Oh, the Moaning, yeah. The Moaning Minis, what they are is a 6-barrel mortars. They're 6 barrels, and they're fired by electric. And if one after another. And as each one gets fired like a rocket, it makes a noise. It moans. So there's 6 mortars firing. There's 6 moans, but they have more than one group of mortars. They might have 2 or 3 of them. So you hear the moaning. You hear the moaning minis coming over. You know darn well that there's a lot of them come 25. They could fire 25 or 100-pound bombs, which are pretty scary. Yeah. You could
And
they
was
use a 75 millimeter a lot. Well, not the 88. The 88 is the one they use quite a bit. They could fire airburst. You know what an airburst is? Yeah. Well, an airburst, for the sake of anybody who doesn't know, is when they fire the shell, it explodes so many feet above the ground, and the shrapnel comes down on the people below it, and they call those airbursts. And the 88 was very good at doing that. They were actually an anti-aircraft gun, but they use them on the ground too. So they're so the amount of the speed, what do you call it? When they actually leave the gun to the time they get the target, what do they call that again? Yeah, I know that like at my heart.
Velocity?
Awesome.
velocity? I'm not sure what, Mark, do you know what the technical term would be for that?
Yeah.
No, it's not coming to me either. We're all having a bit of a brain pause.
Jim, I think I recall from your story in Carpiquet, wasn't there a circumstance where you were virtually buried alive?
Well, what happens? We actually was the trench is partly dug, only about 2 feet or so, and I had a parapet there, and I had a pretty big parapet, and the shell landed close, and it blew all the parapet onto me in a trench. What I did is when they heard the shelling coming, you get as close to the ground as possible. If you could dig quick, you'd be digging with your hands just like a dog. But you just press yourself into the ground, and the shells landed pretty close, and most of the dirt that come on me was from the parapets. And it's my friend of mine, my buddy in the trench was Bob Hussey. He was okay, but he sort of dug me out. It covered me with dirt. He dug me out, and first of all, he grabbed my helmet and he tugged at my helmet, and I sort of was in a daze, you know. And then he started to pull the dirt off. Yeah, that was at Carpiquet. That's what you call getting your, what do you call it? Oh, I forget it. I thought of a word, but it can't be mentioned. Yeah.
And what happened to you guys after Carpiquet, Jim?
Geez. Well, I forgot what we go to. We go to fillets, didn't we?
Yeah.
There was a story that you had on the way, because I don't think we'll go as far as fillets tonight, but I remember there being a story where you said they brought in trucks and you guys were allowed to take a shower after Carpiquet.
Oh, that was when things sort of cut back. They used to go back to mobile showers. They had these trucks that had heaters with big tanks of hot water, and they had 6 showers. And what you did is you walk up, you had a place to go, and you throw all your clothes on the ground, and you just go in there stark naked. And when you finish your shower, you go and pick some clean clothes. But you kept your battle dress jacket because it's all your paraphernalia on it. But all the other clothes you threw in a pile, and you picked a bunch of cleaner underwear and clothes and socks. Yeah. That was that was pretty good. And apparently, Major General Keller, he came to visit, and they started to shell, so he had to take cover. He jumped in one of the trenches. He jumped on top of a guy who just come from the shower, stark naked. He jumped right on top. The story went around like mad after that. You know?
That's a great story. And from what I remember, Jim, you picked up a good luck charm. You had like a stick that you carried around with you or something.
No, it was a little small stick about 3 inches, that big. And I I picked it on the beach, and I started to chew it. And after I put it with my first aid pack, I figured, well, it'd bring me luck. I had that stick right with me the rest of the war. I kept it, and I lost it afterwards. I even had it back home. I had it in the top drawer of my dresser. I had it in the left-hand corner. I had stuck it there, but eventually disappeared. A lot of things that I picked, I actually ended up. Just one of these soldiers I picked up. I picked up one of these armbands with a Nazi swastika on it, and I had one of those, and I picked up a Luger and a P-38. A few things I was able to take back to be echelon, stick them in my pack. And lo and behold, I was lucky because most of the time the people that took them back there, people stole them. They went through the packs. But I ended up, I still had my pack. I still had the Luger and those insignias inside. I was kind of lucky that way.
And Glenn, I can see that you had a question you wanted to ask Jim. Why don't you do that, and I'll bring up a few pictures of Jim while you go ahead.
Yeah, and then afterwards, I see Don has a question. We'll ask him. I just wonder. I know we're focusing on D-Day and Normandy today, and we can't go through all your war experience, Jim. But did you make it? Did you fight all the way to the end of the war?
I stuck it right through to the end. I ended up losing my hearing, part of my hearing, and I wear hearing aids now. And this is part of our mortar platoon. And that's one of the ends. He used to remind me of Hopalong Cassidy. If you ever remember movies with Hopalong Cassidy.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's Butch Milhausen up here. That's me in the center. And Butch Milhausen is on my right shoulder. And that's Blackfoot Carlton there with the sweater on. And the two guys on the far right, they were to replace two people that we had were wounded. Went back, they come in and replaced them. And down, this guy was the guy in the front holding a mug. He had dual citizenship. He's American and Canadian. So on his shoulder badge, he had Canada and he had USA. And that's this guy in the center is a guy called Roski, and he was a lot of fun. And like I say, Pete Enns over here, he was a Hopalong Cassidy. You know, if anybody was a real cool customer, that was Pete. I remember one time that they sent me down said go down the crossroads. I had the Stereo 8 set, which is a small radio, and let us know if you hear any vehicles coming. I was only there about 5 minutes, and I hear somebody call me, hey Jim. I look around, there's Pete. He says, no use us being here, Jim. What do you say we go back? I said, I'm ready to go back anytime. So we went back. We got back there a few minutes later. They shelled the whole crossroads. So I would have been mincemeat if I had stayed there. Yeah.
I see a couple other people that would like to ask a question, but just one point to make. Jim, you are among a relative handful of men from any of the Allied countries that landed on D-Day and fought all the way to the end of the war in Europe on May the 8th. Given the casualty rates in the frontline infantry companies, which was in most cases 200, 300, 400% during that 10-month period, you're one of a few people that accomplished that all the way through from any of the countries. It's just amazing. Don, I think Don had his hand up first.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jim, when the Battle of Carpiquet started, it started at 5 o'clock in the morning with a barrage from 700 and some odd pieces of artillery and tanks and the ships from offshore firing 15 and 16-inch shells. What do you recall about what the sound was like?
I remember you could always tell the big, we didn't know what the hell we were at first. The shells were coming from from offshore, they call it destroyer battleships. You could always tell that. It's a big sound. You hear sort of a vibrating sound, and you knew it was going above, and it was landing. it was quite a big explosion because they were what 14, 16-inch shells. They fired,
Yes.
so they really rack up a lot of damage where they were, and we're always worried that they might fall short because the artillery, if you believe, the other time they fall short. It's not because they wanted to, because it's some fault in the gun, in the barrel, not the barrel, but the round that they're firing. There might have been a few grams less of TNT in there. You never can tell. Yeah.
But it was obviously pretty loud for that in that initial barrage that was going over.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those barrages were damn noisy. They're always noisy, but those ones we heard is that's on the battleships out in the. I said, "Do you mean that we're that close?" Because they could fire 22 miles. That's how far they could fire. So they were firing offshore for 6 miles. To fire 8 or 9 miles inshore was easy. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
And Steve, your question?
Thank you. Jim, I'm curious, you had months and years of training before the landing. And what were your thoughts as you were getting off the landing craft and working your way ashore? Were you instinctively reacting on your training? Were you trying to think back about the training and implementing it? What were some of your thoughts versus the training and the reality?
Well, the thing is, I was things that was going through my mind. How am I going to get out of here? Make sure I didn't get hurt. You get to shore before I get hurt. Like I say, I had to do a bit of swimming because our boat got hit and we lost our water carriers. So I was anxious to get in, and I flopped. I remember I grabbed one of the. So there's quite a few waves coming in because we're near the shore, and they were coming from left to right, and I grabbed one of these obstacles that had the explosion at the top. As long as you didn't touch it, you're okay. So I hung on to that for a while. And the waves were waving over me, and so I managed to make my way to shore. That's when I ran into Corporal Scaife on the ground and picked up a Sten gun. Yeah, that was I still see Scaife today. You know, he's a nice looking fellow from Saskatchewan, right? And I can still see him when I plop down beside him. I can still see his face.
Thank you.
He'll stay with me all the time.
Sure.
Thank you.
And
Scott, it's 8:30. We don't need to stop right now, but we do need to think about winding up.
absolutely, we have I think a pretty quick sort of two-part conclusion. So, Mark,
I'm sorry, Don Patton has his hand raised in his window. I
Yeah.
want to make sure we get to him.
I had actually three items. Years ago, when I led trips to to Europe for 25 years, and one of the trips we actually went to the Abbey, and that is one of the really impressive, emotional events of my times at Normandy for sure. I recommend going to the Abbey for anybody that goes to Normandy. The other thing that I would like to know is wonderful graphics. If somebody, after I get off, could tell me where those graphics were published, if it's a book. And then my question is, did Jim or did some of the other people, since they got to England early, did they pull any people out of the Canadian troops that he was with to go on the Dieppe raid?
What was that again? The Dieppe raid you talked about?
Yeah, did any, since the Canadians went over early, did they pull any troops with Jim or other people that were on the Dieppe raid?
Second division, they built. That's the people they sent troops with the Dieppe raid.
Okay.
Second Canadian division.
But you didn't know
about the casualties.
You didn't know any people that went on that raid.
Not really. I might have at the time. Offhand, I can't remember anybody right now.
Thank you so much.
That they were one of the units that was in there was one of the units I joined up with, the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders, before I was shipped to the Winnipeg Rifles. So I knew a few guys that were in there.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thanks.
Okay.
And Mark, I know you have a conclusion to your part of the story, so why don't you go first and I'll follow.
Okay, I'll do another quick share. This is partly goes to the graphics point that the last person asked about. The photos that I used all come from the 3 books, which we call the Juno Beach trilogy. So Juno Beach is June 6th. Holding Juno goes June 7th to 12th, and then Breakout from Juno starts with Carpiquet and goes through to the end of the Normandy campaign. And for the Canadians, the Normandy campaign was extremely costly. We suffered 18,444 casualties overall within that period through to the August 21st, 1944. And 5,021 of those soldiers died. Normandy campaign for the Allies, of course, was extremely terrible. There were 206,700 casualties in total amongst Canadian, British, Polish, and American casualties who fought there. And so the Normandy campaign is a very difficult campaign for all 4 of the nations that were principally involved in that. And I think there wasn't a soldier, Jim included, who went through that who wasn't indelibly marked by the experience of what they had in their lives with that. And not many, I don't think any veteran, Jim, amongst them, probably like yourself, came out of Normandy without feeling a bit scarred.
Thank you, Mark. I put a link to the Juno Beach trilogy in the chat.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to get it.
And I can highly recommend that, having read them and having had the chance to tour around with Mark. Really, really a worthwhile read. I wanted to welcome George for a moment, and this is George Ferguson. There he is. I'm going to ask you to unmute, George. So I think your son Brett is there with you. Maybe he can help you to unmute. There we are. George, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I'm sorry, I can hear you.
And we can hear you as well, George. I wanted to welcome you. George Ferguson is up in Orillia, Ontario, about an hour or so north of Toronto. He was born July 19th, 1924. So George just turned 101 about a week ago. And he's also a Canadian veteran of the Second World War. He was in the Royal Regiment of Canada, and he found himself in the midst of the Battle of Normandy at about the same time as Jim. He didn't go in on the first wave like Jim, but he was there and he was in the thick of it. I've got a picture of George I want to put up here really quickly. So this is, oh, that's the later George. This is the first George here in his Royal Regiment of Canada uniform coming out of Toronto. Like Jim, George attempted to enlist when he was underage, although they figured him out and kept him out of the army for a little bit. George, like Jim, has gone back to Normandy many times, and that included touring this area called Bomb Alley. George, Mark is the historian who helped us to recall where Bomb Alley was in the town of Menil, right next to Puteaux. George, I think you had just had your birthday or were about to have your birthday in 1944 in Normandy. You were on a patrol in this town, walking through it, and that's when you came under shell fire, right, George?
That's right.
And
we're up at the front.
And of course, one of those explosions knocked you.
We're facing the Germans.
Yep, and one of those explosions knocked you about 10 feet into the air by your recollection. And when George hit the ground, he was badly wounded by shrapnel. He ended up spending the remainder of the war in hospital. He also landed right on his butt, and in his back pocket, he was carrying a harmonica. And the medical staff at the hospital repaired that harmonica for you, right, George?
I couldn't catch what you said, Scott.
Say the
I
medical,
heard something about the hospital.
and they repaired your harmonica for you?
Oh yeah, yeah. When I came back down and landed, I landed on the harmonicas in my back pocket, and the nurse brought it back into me where I was at the like a regimental aid post, I call it, was where we got hit. We were right into the hospital next to it, and she brought the harmonica into me, and she said, "Do you think this will play anymore?" I said, "I don't know." And she said, "I pried the sides out of it, and with tongue depressors, and washed it out with alcohol." And I said, "Well, worst thing you could have done was took the alcohol out of it, leave it. You should have left that in." But it played. It played very well.
And George,
I still have the harmonica today.
do you have that harmonica with you right now?
I still have it today. I still play it. In fact, we play down here at the lodge here every Monday.
So, George,
from 1:30 till 3:30.
I was wondering if
Pardon?
you might be able to play us out tonight. Could you play a little Hank Williams on your harmonica for us?
Do you want me to play a harmonica now?
Yeah, play it right now.
Okay.
I think that'll be our closing theme song tonight.
I'll play the one that I was wanted with.
Any song you want, I'm sure would be fine.
I have a few of them around. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I'm not hearing it too well. Glenn, are you hearing it?
No, I'm not hearing, but just the picture is
yeah. I've heard him play, and I'll put up the link to George's interview, but it's amazing. And George, I wanted to thank you for joining in. Jim, I wanted to thank you for joining in. And Mark, it's been great to see you, of course, and Glenn and Sean and everybody in the VBC. Great to connect as always.
And as someone said earlier, Scott, now we know why Masters is your last name. Another masterful program brought to us by Scott, Mark, Jim, George, and Russ. Thank you for being on tonight. I would like to invite all three of you back, well, all of you back, but Jim and Mark and Scott back for a second show with Jim, because we've only covered the first 6 weeks or 2 months of Jim's experience in World War II. And the fact that he fought all the way to the end is fascinating to me, and I'm sure to our audience. So perhaps this fall, we could have Jim back on and talk about the rest of his experience.
I would be open to that, certainly.
Sounds good.
Thank you all so very much. It's been a very pleasurable evening. And please tune into our programs next Monday and Tuesday. We didn't do any advertising tonight because this was just so fascinating. We didn't want to take a break on that. Thank you much.
Thank you for the invitation.
And we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.